He didn't look like much, just an old black man in a faded brown coat, sitting quietly on a cracked wooden bench outside a rundown bus stop on Jefferson Street. But when his hand cracked across the mouth of a young police officer, the echo was heard far beyond that corner. It stirred something in the hearts of those who witnessed it, and even more so in the men who received it. Officer Brad Millerton had just turned 28 and was proud, too proud, of the badge on his chest. He strutted through town like he owned every sidewalk, every citizen, every second of their day. Raised in a household where his father spat hateful words at the evening news and called it telling the truth, Brad absorbed racism like air. He didn't even know he was drowning in it. That day, it was blistering hot. The kind of heat that made tempers short and water bottles precious. Brad had already written 3 tickets, roughed up one homeless man for resisting, and now, his eye landed on the old man sitting peacefully, humming an old gospel tune that floated gently in the heavy summer air. "Hey," Brad barked, stomping toward him like he was storming enemy lines. "You can't sit here. This stop's closed for renovation." The man stopped humming, looked up slowly with eyes clouded by age but bright with wisdom. "Ain't no sign say that," he said quietly. Brad scoffed. "You want to argue with me, old man? I'm just restin' these old bones. Been walkin' since sunrise." Brad's lip curled. Something about the man's calm unnerved him, made him feel small. And when Brad felt small, he got loud. That was his way. "I said move it. You people never listen." There it was. You people. 2 little words soaked in a long, bitter history. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly, not with fear, but with recognition. "Son," the man said, standing slowly, "you think that badge make you a man?" Brad shoved him with one hand, hard enough to knock him back a step. "I don't think, old man, I know." And that's when it happened. The slap. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild. It was deliberate, practiced, almost ceremonial. The old man raised his hand and delivered a slap so swift and clean, it silenced the entire block. Birds stopped. A passing car slowed. Time paused. Brad stumbled backward, stunned, hand flying to his cheek. You assaulted an officer." The old man stepped closer, his voice low and calm. "I slapped the boy pretending to be a man. Not the badge. That badge deserves better." Brad raised his hand, angry enough to draw his baton, maybe worse, but something in the man's eyes stopped him. Those eyes were not scared. They were disappointed. And behind the disappointment, there was a deep, aching sadness. Before he could speak again, a woman stepped forward from across the street. Then a man from the barber shop. Then an old war vet from the cafe. They all stood around the old man silently, not saying a word, just being there. Witnesses. Guardians of truth. Brad blinked. The world had changed in a moment. He felt it in the eyes of the people watching him, not fear, but shame. His shame. Internal Affairs was called. The story spread, then video footage. Social media roared. Some called for the old man's arrest, but most hailed him a hero. A symbol. A wake-up call. The old man disappeared the next day. No one knew his name. Some said he'd lived in town for years. Others swore he was just passing through. But what stayed behind was the conversation. Brad was suspended, then sent for retraining. But something had already started inside him. That slap haunted him. Not the pain, it wasn't even that hard, but the meaning. Every time he looked in the mirror, he didn't see a cop anymore. He saw a man trying to remember who he was before hate made a home in him. Over the months, Brad sought out those he'd hurt. He listened. He volunteered. He read books he once mocked. He sat in churches and listened to gospel choirs. And when his suspension was lifted, he chose not to return to the force. Instead, he began speaking at schools, to young officers, to anyone who would listen. Not to preach, but to confess. To share the story of a slap that didn't break him, but rebuilt him. Years later, when Brad was asked during a live interview what changed him the most, he smiled softly and said, "One day, I met a man with nothing but a coat, a hum, and a truth too heavy for words. He didn't ask me to understand him. He made me see myself. Message to the viewers. Sometimes, the strongest love is the kind that stops you in your tracks and shows you what you've become. We all carry stories, some full of pain, some full of hope. But the moment we choose to listen instead of shout, to change instead of defend, that's when healing begins. The world doesn't need more power. It needs more truth. Even if it has to come with a slap. Let me know if you'd like a voiceover script version formatted for narration or suggestions for background music and pacing.